everybody, welcome. Thank you all for being here this evening. This is a really great occasion. It's one of my favorite times of the year. I'd like to welcome you all, and I know most everybody in here, but if you don't know who I am, I'm Tom Ashcraft. I am the MFA director, and I have the great privilege and good fortune, along with my colleagues and the staff, everybody here at the School of Art Design, to work with graduate students and undergraduate students in the community here. And I also have the great pleasure of working with these four hooligans right here that are graduating tonight. And this, I was talking with Beth earlier today, and reminded me this is the first time that we've done this, have a presentation and an opening since 2021. So this is really pretty special. It's wonderful. The crew, this is Jeannie Regan, Simone, Yuwen Renjie, and Joey Martin will give presentations, short presentations of their work tonight, around 10 minutes, plus or minus. And after we go through this, there'll be a little Q&A. You can do it afterwards. If anybody has any questions, if you don't have any questions, please come up and ask some questions afterwards. There'll be a break, and between 5 and 7 o'clock tonight is a reception in the Fine Arts Museum. And thank you to the Fine Arts Museum, Carol and Greg and Denise, but thank you for working with grads, selecting work, and as always, Greg, you do a great job figuring out how to make that show look wonderful. So thank you all so very much. I'm going to stop talking. And please, everybody, join me in welcoming these four grads.
Oh, okay, come on.
And you want to turn the lights down?
Oh, yeah. Why is it a panel?
Is this a UV panel? Oh, there you go.
Nope.
It's back here.
Oh my God.
Is that like dirt?
Oh, okay, cool. I was like, I don't know what this is. Hi, I'm Daniel. I'm a third year in this MFA program. I will be graduating shortly. I am an alternative printmaker. I specialize primarily in block printing in particular, and paper making for recycling and recycled materials. The image currently on screen is a detail, a singular print from my installation, Self-Persecution. It's currently in the museum. You can go see it anytime until May. In my first year at Western, I had a really heavy focus on painting. I've always really loved rendering the way bright light hits malleable surfaces, clothing in particular, also rubber. It's a skill I've been very confident at for quite a long time, and I really enjoy it and I'm good at it. At first, I focused on doing painting in a pretty straightforward manner, and then once I got to Western, I decided that I really didn't like the rectangular form. So I tried breaking out of it in pretty straightforward ways. I looked at a lot of assemblage artists and fiber artists, and also my mom, who is a very skilled sewist, and made a lot of my garments for me growing up, and every single Halloween costume. The piece on the left is the third piece. The piece on the left is the third piece I ever made at Western. It is made from thrifted and salvaged upholstery scrap, nitrile gloves, sandpaper, and bandage wrappings. This was kind of inspired by the fact that at this point I had started to become allergic to the paint I was using, and I think a lot of this was from the frustration surrounding that. And later, because I was using so many nitrile gloves, I started to get really self-conscious about the waste that I was using, especially because my studio mate at the time had been focusing very much on recycling waste into our work. So the piece on the right is made entirely up of nitrile and vinyl gloves, because I would purchase whatever was cheapest at the time, and then use them. And these are just glued together, and I painted with acrylic over them. At this point, I had become pretty frustrated with painting, because in addition to my cracked and bleeding hands from the allergy, I felt that the didn't allow me to play within the space. So it was suggested that I try printmaking, and I did. It turns out that I'm pretty good at printmaking, and I immediately fell in love with reduction block printing, which is where you use one singular block and keep chipping away at it for each different layer of color. A lot of people find this quite frustrating. I don't. You carve away the sections that you want to keep the previous color. It requires a lot of planning, and you have to be okay with the fact that you can't go back and print more of the previous layer. So whatever you end up with, and however many you end up with, is what you get. It's pretty high stakes. You have to have a tolerance for registration errors, and you're going to be kind of sad sometimes, but I like it. These two prints are prints of Brood 5, which was the second block I had ever worked on here. Tatiana had given me a giant 18 by 24 lineup block and was like, okay, do this. And I was like, okay. So I did. I think I took pretty naturally to printmaking and papermaking. They're both extremely repetitive and very tedious and delicate and very easy to mess up. And for me, that's kind of what art is all about. Printmaking allowed me to play a lot more. I didn't have to hold myself to the same standards that I did with painting. I had this rule that when I was painting, I had to render everything exactly as I saw it, and I couldn't like play with color at all or mark, which is not a rule in painting, but it was for me. So I was really able to focus more on mark and rendering in ways that were more fun. I could really push composition, and I started to break out of the box in newer ways. Hello, there we go. Papermaking also allowed me to bring in the refuse aspect in different ways too. Instead of taking like entire thrifted panels of fabric and sewing them together, I could make them into paper pulp to pull and print on themselves. I view my handmade paper as a reflection of the self. It's very heavily contextual through different points of life. What am I eating? What clothes have become unwearable? What gifts have I received? What logistical and clerical work have I done and have been contributing to? What readings have I been doing? What have I been teaching my class? All of these represent refuse that goes into my paper pulp. Food packaging, old clothing, all sorts of fiber, paper waste, and gifts. Especially Abaca gifted to me by Lynn, my classmate, and just a lot of salvage. There have been outliers over the past 3 years, of course, because paper takes a lot of time and a lot of energy to make. You have to make the pulp, which can take either a long time if you're using the Hollander, or a really short time if you're using the blender, but still very tedious. You have to pull the sheets, which is actually probably the fastest part, and then they have to dry, which takes days. So I couldn't always make paper here because I would want to have more material for critiques. So when I couldn't make the paper myself, I tried to layer. So these prints are from an edition I did in which I printed a couple of like the images I originally used to screen print these onto really transparent Han mule paper that Brooklyn gave me, and also previous essays I had done for Seth's class, and also poetry by Wendy Cope that I just printed really transparently, and I layered over like the first layer of block print, and then printed more on top of that. One of these prints was featured in Beijing in the show the grads had with many incredible Chinese artists in Beijing, which was facilitated by Yuwen and Beijing University of Technology. It was incredible. When Helene hit, of course, a lot of us couldn't work in our studios or in the fashions we typically work. I had a bit of a major creative block that I actually only very recently got over. So in that time, I decided to turn to my favorite thing to do, which is portraiture of my partner. And this paper is made, so that the paper on the left is BFK, but the paper on the right is made up entirely of my old prints and their old work clothes, because whenever they wear out like the pants they have to wear to work, they just give them to me, and they're like, do something with this. I'm like, thank you. This portrait really launched me into thinking about utilizing refuse and contextualizing my relationships to other people and our environment, especially as me and my partner are transgender people in the current political climate. This also had me thinking about my relationships to other people within the context of inherited familial traits. I touched earlier on this in my piece 25 step, where I was thinking heavily about genetic and behavioral traits I inherited from my estranged father, and how he got those traits from generational trauma and so on. I was thinking, with self-persecution, about a past self who perhaps had not yet discarded those behaviors, or was not yet working on reconciling those parts of keeping those inherited traits versus throwing away the ones that were not needed. My work being cyclical is not just through my literal cyclical process of recycled paper making. Here are some details from this piece. It's really big, it has a lot of layering. The pieces that are BFK, some of them are just BFK, some of them are just my handmade paper, and a couple of them are, like this one on the bottom, are BFK with handmade paper that I cut out. And I don't want to say I shinkaled them on, because I kind of just bootleg shinkaled them on, but that's fine. My work in the thesis show revolves around, there it is. Nope. Yes, sorry. My work in the thesis show revolves around my relationship and lack thereof between myself and my estranged father's family, and how that has shaped who I am as a human being, with particular reverence towards my grandfather, David, and my uncle, Hank. Both were very flawed people in very different ways, but both are irremovable parts of my being. This piece, Intangible Tangible, is made of a large photograph printed digitally on my handmade paper. This took about 20 sheets of 11 by 17 is the size of the paper, which they themselves were made up of 2 each of smaller pieces of paper. Right now, my paper making has become sort of a perpetual stew kind of deal, in that I no longer know entirely what it's made of. Every batch of paper I have, probably a decent portion of the pulp goes into the next batch. So there's bits of pulp in these pages that was present in my first ever batch. The photograph present in this is of my Uncle Hank's house, which was previously David's, in Highsville, Tennessee. It's condemned and it's padlocked, and as much as I would like to, I can't get in. But I felt the need to visit and sit with my uncle and grandfather in order to create this piece. Over top, there are layered portrait prints of David that I found of him in his mid to late 20s by stalking my father's Facebook, and also myself trying to emulate that. I found it really interesting through this project that I look a lot more like David and Hank than I do my actual father. They both have this really crooked grin that I also have, that my father doesn't have, and that was a really interesting thing to pick up during my making of these projects. David in particular was not a very kind man. He was also a project of generational trauma and imparted that on his children, who then imparted it onto me. But I find it really interesting, and I hold a weird reverence to him. I started this project thinking that actually it would be pretty easy emotionally, and then I did it, and then I was like, oh no, this is actually difficult. Lastly, the most recently finished work is this one. It's called Tread Carefully. As foreshadowed a little bit by the last piece, the orange, that's paint. I am getting back into painting just a little bit. As long as I use the rules that I used for myself for printmaking, turns out painting's actually fun again. This piece is made up from the same perpetual stew as the last paper, except this has a lot more of my high school clothes in it, and also blue coloring, whereas the last one was just yellow. I don't have any pictures of my Uncle Hank as an adult. I barely have pictures of him in general. The few pictures that I do have are of him as a child. So the screen printing and the shadows are drawn from a particular photo of him as a child at his brother Danny's birthday party. I'm not named for Danny, it is just a coincidence. But I've always felt an attachment to that photo, because I think he looks a lot like me when I was his age in that picture. And I screen printed it onto the shadows kind of as a reflection of the past. All in all, I'm very happy with my thesis work. in the show. And I'm really happy with where this program has brought me, and I'm really excited to see what happens next. I'm very grateful, particularly to Tatiana, for hosting my printmaking efforts and letting me use all of the equipment, even though sometimes I misuse it a little bit. And of course, I'm grateful for all of the MFA cohort and everybody here, really. Thank you very much. Oh no, I'm sorry. Oh, I'm so sorry.
Oh, yes, yes, yes.
Oh, okay.
So that's my name.
Good start.
Thank you all for being here. Really means a lot. It's bittersweet wrapping this up. It's the end of a chapter, but it's very much the beginning of a lot of things. It's the beginning of some sort of our career for us, whatever form that takes. And for me, it's in some ways a new way of approaching painting. It's not incredibly new, but it's very different from the work I've been doing for the first 2 years of the program. So I'll take you along the chronology of that work up until the thesis work. So if I'm not mistaken, the piece on the left, The Winds of Venus, is the first painting I made while I was here. So I'm bringing, I wanted to kind of take one step back from conceptual work that I was making in undergrad, because it's important to me that the work is, that it aligns with my writing and the way I speak about it, and that it's honest. And so I was initially mostly just painting, more concerned about what it looks like rather than the concept behind it, because that's something I wanted to work on, and that I did work on since I've been here in the program. So abstractions of landscapes essentially is what I was doing first. Here's another example. So next would be abstractions of nature. So I'm not shifting gears too crazy yet, but so the closest I got to any kind of conceptual consideration in these works is this idea of animism, which is, this is the animist expanse. It's considered to be an early human conceptualization of the view of the world where there's autonomy and agency in everything, like rivers and storms and all kinds of things. And while that's not something I literally believe, I think it instills a certain reverence for nature and functions visually in the paintings as well. So there's a through line. In all my work, which is an inspiration from nature and a reverence for the environment and animals, things like that. And I think this affinity for nature is hardly unique to my experience. I mean, I think it's almost universal that we at least occasionally want to separate ourselves from modern life and get our toes in the grass or climb a mountain trail. And I think that's getting at something like this desire to evoke a sense of awe and wonderment that I hope comes across in the paintings. So I've been hard to pin down. I've shifted gears several times. These are huge right now, but they're actually like small little drawings. Most of these that I do are usually no bigger than that. I just do them for fun. These with the vertical orientation are almost always done like at work while I'm bored on the back of the menus that I would use to like take orders and things. So this whole style is kind of derived from this practice of stream of consciousness, or you could call it autonomism or free association, where you can kind of see remnants of the first like scribbles that I start with. So yeah, scribbles, random marks, stains, just something to get me started, and then like reading clouds or Rorschach ink blot or something, I'm kind of finding the imagery and rendering that out. And trying to be as pure with that as I can, not deviating from my initial objects that I'm rendering. next I tried to bring this style into painting. I was met with some tension trying to translate that immediacy that you get from the pencil and pen into the medium of paint, and the larger scale and all of that slows things way down, and gave me almost a little too much time to consider the imagery. And so, I don't know, while tapping the subconscious for imagery is enjoyable, it's useful for sharpening the imagination, generating imagery, and finding ways around blocks. It's not something I'm going to stop doing. I personally found this to be lacking as far as my aspiration for my paintings to have a statement. And that's not to say that there can't be a statement in this work, but it's just not what I want to get at. So here are some more examples of that kind of drawing. Actually, this gets a bit closer to the drawing style. This is oil pastel. So I'm fairly happy with these works, but again, the imagery that comes up is sort of, you could say random. I don't think it's entirely random, but so that brings on one more, I think. Yeah, so this is, after that I shifted gears a little bit, still working in stream of consciousness, but getting way more painterly. And I like these pieces. It's getting closer, but it's still in that kind of, again, quote unquote random image generation. So that brings us to the work I made that's in the thesis exhibition. I shifted gears again, sort of out of ideas. I came into last semester with this idea to paint from a real life event. So I'm dipping my toes into concept and narrative, which is much more involved than, or at least a lot more to consider. So this piece came about from when my family and I, we had the beach house rental, and when we got there after Hurricane Debbie, Debbie was a bullfrog is the title, the carport was flooded, and like no damage to the house or anything like that, but the carport was just swimming with hundreds of tadpoles. And so I was like, what am I gonna do with all these? Like, I can't just let them dry up. So I tasked myself with using that blue plastic shovel there in the painting to scoop them up and put them in a bucket and take them off to some standing water near the beach access. And there's the very gracious parents of the frogs as I'm rescuing their children. So this sparked a new direction. Instead of kind of relying on that stream of consciousness approach to arrive at painting, it became much more intentional about constructing space representationally, lighting, and then painting in a way that has sort of a more moral and meaningful idea. Here's a detail from that painting. You can see just left of it, and there's a little kind of a close-up of the little tadpole dudes. So chronologically, this painting was next. The Elephant and the Rider. That title comes from American psychologist and writer Jonathan Haidt, where in his metaphor, the elephant is the symbol of like our emotional core that kind of calls the shots most of the time in our decision making. And the rider, in this case, it's a monkey, just sort of more for aesthetic reasons than anything. The rider being this little sliver of conscious control that we try to maintain. And so these two guys are working to reconstruct a framework of morality, politics, and mythos from the remnants of dismantled ideologies, which is a mouthful, right? But I think it does get to what we're seeing lately, where for the past who knows how many years, ideologies and religions have been criticized and dismantled, maybe for good reason, maybe not, without much put in its place. And the results of that, at least in part, are sort of crisis of meaning. Where do you put your meaning? What kind of purpose do you have? Crisis of meaning, numbing behaviors, depression, anxiety, all these things. Hardly new to the human an edge of humor in the work. So this kind of gets at the ridiculous nature of what's happening in the painting. Clearly, it's a satire of our irrational solutions to problems, but also hopeful in that there's an attempt being made to reconstruct something. But it's precarious, right? It's a tricky thing to navigate. All right, next is holy water treatment. And this painting is based on the Ganges River, or the Ganges in India. And I want to preface this by saying I haven't been to India. I don't know a ton about it, but as I'm concerned with environmental degradation and things like that, this instance of this polluted river stood out to me. So I want to be respectful and careful how I talk about it, but it's mainly about this idea of polluted spiritual waters. And so there's these, so the Ganges is a sacred site of ritual bathing and spiritual renewal. And yeah, again, now it's contaminated by industrial waste, untreated sewage, and human activity. So this painting is another kind of irrational solution to a problem where there's all this water filtration system going on in the background. There's a water wheel pumping the water up forward to the foreground. There's a pipeline to this basin. The design on that glass basin is the flower of life, which I think just nods towards the spiritual aspect of the waters. And the elephant being, in this case, mechanical, but the elephant is a sacred animal to the culture of the area, and also with it being in this kind of format, sort of a symbol of the exploitation that's happening to animals in the environment. So yeah, it's pumped through this, it goes down through these basins, through these layers of filtration, and collected into this final basin at the bottom. So another example of the irrational and short-sighted solutions to problems, and as well as the physical, psychological, and spiritual repercussions of contaminating sacred or important cultural and environmental sites. Finally, that brings me to the last painting. This one is kind of a little more fun and silly and lighthearted. If you're not familiar, this is based on Guitar Hero. It's a video game from the early 2000s. It's you have a plastic guitar, 5 buttons, and a little strum bar, and you're trying to match the timing of these fret buttons that are floating towards you. In this case, it's in a river, of course, not on a TV screen. So it's a rhythm-based video game. And I guess in this case, it's more about like finding rhythm and harmony within nature. It's meant to be kind of fun and silly. These in the corners are called the hood system, the heads-up display, and it just shows like your how well you're doing your point system and things like that. So that's pulled straight from the game. And these little rock stacks are called cairns, and they traditionally are symbols of, they're way makers that found on paths to mark paths and graves and all kinds of things like that. So I found that topical for this painting. The river and the mountain in this, the whole scenery really is loosely pulled from my view from my apartment complex. So this is Appalachian Hero. And that's me. I have one more thing to say. So we've been talking about absurdism as kind of a theme in these paintings. The way I use it is more synonymous with like senseless or ridiculous, and the philosophical direction gets way more existential, which I'm familiar with doing. But I think I'd be remiss if I didn't mention a prominent figure on the subject of absurdism, which is French philosopher and writer Albert Camus. His conclusion about absurdism, as he describes it, absurdity being this kind of sense of meaninglessness, or like a realization of meaninglessness. And essentially he says the solution to that kind of conclusion is choosing to live with full awareness of the absurd, refusing to be consumed sold or false hope, but also refusing to give in to despair. He writes, "The struggle itself towards the heights is enough to fill a man's heart. One must imagine Sisyphus happy." Sisyphus being, if you're not familiar, this mythical figure condemned to push a heavy stone up the hill for eternity. Major bummer. And that's the metaphor he uses in his book, The Myth of Sisyphus, on absurdism. So we've hit some heavy topics, right? And you might not read that into the work initially, and I appreciate that. Really, I think it, again, I try to keep an edge of humor in the work as a way to defang this heaviness and invite you in with pretty little scene. So at the risk of being a little dramatic here, if you find yourself in a place of depression or nihilism about the state of the world or your place in it, keep pushing is the punchline. Easier said than done, of course, but keep making art. Keep asking questions. Keep building meaning and relationships, even if that boulder is heavy. Creativity and laughing along the way is going to take us pretty far. Rather than resorting to irrational solutions, I think creativity wins. So thank you all.
Hi everyone. My name is Yuwen Renjie. I'm a material-based sculptor or installation artist from China, and I'm working across East Asian traditions and contemporary experimental practice. So today I will share my MFA thesis project titled "Eternal Question," and how it extends from my earlier act series that work into a site-specific installation rooted in material, memory, and time. So my previous work, that is the last one, that one names the X series, explore the impermanence of life and bodily memory of time, and especially during the COVID-19 lockdown in China. So currently this one is the name Eternal Question carries the conceptual framework further into a communal context, combining personal memory with the local trauma from the Hurricane Helen in 2024. And the project, this is my last semester's work, and the current work keep this concept and the idea of this, keep the framework, and the project centered on the tension between permanence and fragility, decay and memory, monumentality and anti-monumentality. The work is also a ritual space. The viewers have to or must physically enter and engage with it. So all of the trees in this work is used in, or we collected after the Hurricane Helen devastated our Colombia region. And they once stood as a symbol of growth, but now fallen and silent. They are now paupers, and they are witness. So the three trees from the triangular structure, between them are red fishing lines changed to walks and suspended lacquer apples. The center is left open, filled with ceramic apples and the sharded fragment. And then this is the center or idea or the keyword of my work. So I try to use the different material or the media and to do some interpret or some explain or engage with this different concept. So the first part is the dry lacquer sample. The lacquer is a very special and specific material that in my works, and that is from East Asia's parts. So I try to use the dry lacquer be a main material in my work. These dry lacquer apples are made by wrapping fresh apple with layers of lacquer and clay ash. The surface is often interrupted by fungal stains, a
cracks or metallic oxidation. These apples appear still, yet the decay continues inside, symbolizing suspended time. And
After I arrived here, I try to use some different material to copy this or keep this idea.
So I try to use the ceramic. So these ceramics are also formed by wrapping real apple in paper and clay stick and firing it. The fruit vanishes, leaving a very thin and fragile shells. Sometimes it's whole and sometimes it's broken. And each shell bears unique trace of fire, time, and absence. And the newspaper. This is a very ephemeral object. So it's constantly fired into a ceramic and then shattered by audience footsteps. It's become a paradox, a lasting material representing the collapse of information. And for these installation work, the viewer had to have some interact with these. The viewer step into space, bend, twist, listen, and crush. And each body movement generates a physical and some trace of time. The work is never finished. It evolves through interaction. And the rest reconnect not just the physical space, but metaphorical layers of bloodlines, memory, grief, and sensitive.
You can find that the little light part as is from the fishing line.
And it's strange and trembles like memory itself. So, okay, this is a little video. See this project as a growing language. So in the future works, I will continue exploring this unfinished state, material memory, and the politic of decay across different cultural boundaries. And before conclude time, I would like to take a moment to express my heartfelt gratitude. So first, I have to say thank you for my professor, Tom Ashcroft. Thank you for your unwavering support, thoughtful guidance, and kindness throughout my MFA journey. And your encouragement has been a light in moments of doubt, and I truly cannot have come this far without you. And then I have to, this is to my fellow MFA cohorts. You are the most passionate, generous, and inspiring artists I have had the privilege to work with. And thank you for always making me feel welcome and for your warmth, collaboration, and constant encouragement. And I have to say thank you for the, sorry, to the faculty and staff in the Barlow Art Center, especially for Tom Schramm, to Heather Craig, Kevin, and Greg Caroline. Thank you for your incredible patience and support for for this international student. And your help made me feel and safe. Thank you. And finally, I want to thank my family, and especially for my Gary Kernan for standing by me during the most difficult and painful moments of this part. Your faith in me and your quiet strength keep me guarded. Thank you.
saying thank you. These are all the collaborative and interactive public projects I have done during my time here. That's a lot. I also spent time researching and doing presentations on these areas of study, and I've become a bit of an evangelist about social prescribing, which I'm very excited to talk about to anyone who has 3 or 4 hours to spare. At the start of the program, this is the sort of work I was doing. That is hand-dyed, salvage fabric sewn together, inspired by the view looking up at the sky in crowded city streets. Cute. And then, that's with this guy on the right. Public practice. 2 projects came out of that class. Bards of Bardot with Daniel Simone, which was recorded Shakespearean monologues in locations in the Bardot building, and Repairorama, which was a creative reuse and repair game show with visiting artist Julia Gartrell. That class changed my life. Thanks, Tom. So you can blame Tom. My first big girl job happened when an alum of this program, Lex Turnbull, recommended me to Marilyn Zapp, head curator at the Center for Craft. Marilyn was looking for a creative director for an immersive experience that they wanted to create in the basement of the Center for Craft building. I pitched Marilyn my vision for a post-major event future Appalachian night market, and what followed was a budget of over $100,000 and a team of extremely talented and passionate people. Next up was Valenween, which stemmed from my novelty plus usefulness idea incubator, where I attempted to offer creative solutions to social problems in the guise of a quasi-government department. Period poverty is a major problem in our and many other communities, with a frustratingly simple solution. I invented a holiday that happens annually on February 15th, the day after Valentine's Day, and it's a mashup of Valentine's and Halloween, using costumes and fake blood to bring humor to a subject that many people still feel uncomfortable talking about. Then we had Community Quilt, which was a collaboration with Local Cloth, Asheville. The plan was to devise a template of a community care activity that could be replicated by school groups or corporate entities wanting to do a service project. Lake Monster Parade was a project I actually started before I came to WCU. It's an annual community costume parade at Lake Tomahawk Park in Black Mountain. It was originally formed in response to the rising costs of childcare during the summer, making summer camps and activities out of reach for many families. The date of the 4th year of the parade had actually been pushed back, and it fell on the day after the hurricane, so we've missed a year. The town of Black Mountain came together swiftly to do search and rescue and repairs, but it was a group of women, most of us were mums, who got together and figured out how to provide food, water, clothing, and essential supplies. We set up a distribution hub in the Ingalls Garden Center. With the help of hundreds of volunteers, plus the military, we were able to quickly supply Black Mountain and the neighboring towns with essential supplies. This slide shows 3 moments that stand out in my memory of that time. On the left is Sandy and Harold playing violin as people collected what they needed. We were all so tired and filthy, and people were really nervous about asking for help and receiving charity. And Sandy made it feel really fun and magical. On the top right photo, I got a text 2 days before a gift was due to arrive from Virginia. They were letting me know that we were going to get some fruit, but they didn't sort of specify. It was an incredible sight to walk into the distribution area and see that, and it was also a massive logistical nightmare to distribute all the fruit before it went bad. But we did it, okay. The photo at the bottom right was the most surreal. I was at the check-in desk looking at some delivery requests for the VA when a man approached letting me know he was a farmer who had driven from Maryland with a tractor trailer of hay for local livestock farmers. We had really patchy internet and cell service, but I somehow managed to get all of that hay loaded onto a military cargo helicopter at the agricultural center and then airdropped to farmers in need who were cut off from using the roads. I like to imagine those cows seeing hay bales bringing down from the sky. The distribution center used a lot of skills I developed in community action, but turned the dial up to 100. I'm still processing like what I learned, how I might take that forward into projects. Orbit Space came about because China Outlets offered me a vacant store for 3 months to support artists affected by the hurricane. Colby Caldwell from Revolve in Asheville and I put together the Orbit Space Emergency Response Gallery on an incredibly tight timeline. As well as showing work in a gallery setting, we had artist talks, demonstrations, and classes in the space. My favorite part was kids coming into gallery who hadn't really seen a lot of art and then pointing at stuff and saying, "How much is that?" And I would say, "Well, $12,000," and they would be like, "Cool. I'm gonna be an artist." I was like, "Great." Say hi to your mom. It was really, really wonderful. Dance Day was an event that was part of the Mall Rats Collective, which I founded over at Asheville Mall, with the aim of bringing arts programming to the mall audience. I organized a showcase of local dance schools, and yeah, Mall Rats had a little bit of a pause, obviously, hurricane, but we're back going into planning. We have our first art exhibition opening in mid-May, which will be right next to JCPenney. Okay, finally, the 2 current projects. Play to Pay is a phone app I'm developing that centers in-person gameplay as a means to raise funds and encourage social interaction. It should be available to download in June for both Apple and Android. And First Hand Accounts, which is on display in the museum right now. It's a letter writing and archiving